everybody, and welcome back to the final episode of NYANCAST. Right now, I'm joined by a fellow named Yellow,
Hello
Rub
there.
of Rub's Gaming Corner fame,
Hello there.
and Carter. I think this is the first time you're seeing Carter as a guest on our show. He has kept up with Nyan Neko Sugar Girls throughout, though, so he is definitely a qualified panelist. In this final episode, we're going to be covering episodes 9 and 10 of the mainline series, which are probably some of the most somber and plotting episodes and some of my personal favorites in the entire show. So, starting with episode 9, we're going to do a light recap of some of the moments that we wanted to discuss. Does anyone have anything they want to say about the first few moments? We've analyzed the intro in nearly every single episode of this podcast, but it always seems like there's more to say. Does anyone have anything left?
I feel
We're
like
talking about episode 9.
yeah, Rob. I feel like we brought up
Um,
that like I think one of the previous episodes that we mentioned like it's saying XD, it's actually saying XC, which like we just realized.
Yeah, I think
upon, like,
we
another
just
recap.
misspoke.
Probably, I don't know.
Too fast.
I mean, it's easiest to see and talk about whenever the source material is actually in front of you, so you can actually like compare it to what you're saying. But we're just kind of spitballing here.
Yeah. So let's move on then, because again, we've analyzed the crap out of that intro. So we open and Hitoshi's trying to talk to Koneko kind of lightheartedly about how he's watching an American television show called The Nanny, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with The Nanny. It's
yeah, Fran
it's a
Drescher.
sitcom from the 90s. Yeah, about living in living in Queens.
So, do you think this is like in the past or something then?
I find it, well, I don't know. Hitoshi's kind of an eccentric character. And I'm sure this show has tons of reruns. I mean, it was a real hit at the time.
Sure.
And I mean, even when this episode came out, it was what, 2011, 2012?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was around that time.
So I'm not
Like a
super
little over
familiar
a
with the
decade.
program myself, but knowing that Hitoshi's watching a television program about a fashionista trying to hoof it in a big city might tell us a little bit of something about his character, but I'm not really sure if we can make any calls there. What we do know is that Koneko finds this incredibly inappropriate to be talking about during their friend's crisis, which I always appreciate. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the final episode of NYANCAST. Right now, I'm joined by a fellow named Yellow,
Hello
Rub
there.
of Rub's Gaming Corner fame,
Hello there.
and Carter. I think this is the first time you're seeing Carter as a guest on our show. He has kept up with Nyan Neko Sugar Girls throughout, though, so he is definitely a qualified panelist.
We should
In
probably
this
double
final
check
episode,
that.
we're going to be covering episodes 9 and 10 of the mainline series, which are probably some of the most somber and plotting episodes and some of my personal favorites in the entire show. So, starting with episode 9, we're going to do a light recap of some of the moments that we wanted to discuss. Does anyone have anything they want to say about the first few moments? We've analyzed the intro in nearly every single episode of this podcast, but it always seems like there's more to say. Does anyone have anything left?
I feel
We're
like
talking about episode 9.
yeah, Rob. I feel like we brought up
Um,
that like I think one of the previous episodes that we mentioned like it's saying XD, it's actually saying XC, which like we just realized.
Yeah, I think
upon, like,
we
another
just
recap.
misspoke.
Probably, I don't know.
Too fast.
I mean, it's easiest to see and talk about whenever the source material is actually in front of you, so you can actually like compare it to what you're saying. But we're just kind of spitballing here.
Yeah. So let's move on then, because again, we've analyzed the crap out of that intro.
She does wake up and she's a cat again. We forgot the entire scene where she gets up and says like, "Oh my Kami, you're a Neko again" or something.
I mean, she turns into a cat, but she's been doing that for a while.
For like the past episode or two, yeah.
Yeah, Rob.
I just really wanted to focus on what she said there when
What?
she realized
Oh
her
my
friend turned
Kami
into
or
a cat.
whatever.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Kami is the Japanese word for God, but since they have like, it's kind of strange because as a direct translation, it means God, but as a Japanese word, it kind of refers to their Shinto pantheon, which is like millions of like spirit creatures. If that
So,
makes
Is she referring to all of them at once? Like,
So when you say "Oh my Kami-sama," especially in the context of Nyan Neko Sugar Girls, where these Japanese words are kind of taken into direct translation into English words, and we've discussed this a lot in the past as well, it probably is referring to a monotheistic god. Considering the meshing of American and Japanese culture that we've seen in this, and how their language has been so decimated.
There's also the
I-
occasional reference to Spanish, a little bit of Spanglish here and there.
Yeah, but I think that only happens when Koneko's kind of in distress. It seems like that might be like her mother tongue or something.
do you think Koneko could be
Which
an immigrant, perhaps?
yeah, it adds a kind of a depth to her character.
Maybe that's what the cat is supposed to represent.
I don't think so, because Raku seems very much Japanese, whereas Koneko.
Well, maybe
This brings up a lot of questions about the origins of these cat girls, because my theory on Koneko is this meshing of Japanese and American culture. I think Hitoshi is Hafu. He's a Japanese American child, and Koneko is like an immigrant from Mexico, who, since Japan and America are so closely intertwined in this universe, in like a slightly satirical sense, she, being a Spanish American, a Spanish or Hispanic immigrant into America, allows her this passage to Japan, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think maybe cat could represent a second-class citizen in some sort of way. We've talked about this in the past, but like,
Yeah.
maybe being Japanese American is the highest totem pole in this society.
That would make sense. That would make a lot of
which
sense.
which is why the pure quote unquote Japanese.
So, anyways, after they talk about the rude interruption and bringing up and Raku-chan's distress, talking about the nanny, they end up going to the vet's office.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this, I think I alluded to this in an earlier episode of the podcast. That Sama actually has a lot more spiritual ability, which again I thought was alluded to earlier, and this is when we really see that come out. But one of my favorite little details in this scene when they're in the waiting room is Hitoshi, of course, is just sitting there because he has a more difficult time connecting emotionally, but Koneko is like tapping her finger, which I thought was a great detail in the animation, showing how nervous and anxious she is for her dear friend.
Mm-hmm.
And then
So there really was a sense of dread for the Neko.
yeah, I
mean,
think those are
honestly,
pretty consistent through the two episodes. They
it's a
really do
very
a lot with the
tense
moody
scene.
atmosphere. Yeah. But we finally get a diagnosis beyond the rabies, of course, for what's wrong with Raku. And we'll get back to the rabies, I think, after we're done with episode 10, because I want to discuss the transient and kind of dreamlike nature of the series. But she gets diagnosed with having a Baka Neko demon inside of her, which is causing her this transformation. So that god she saw earlier and met during that kind of vision quest was in fact a demon.
Mm.
At least that's what's implied to me. And again, the lines between demon and god and Japanese culture are very thin. So definitely maybe a cultural thing. So the ritual is underway, and this is an interesting ritual. I don't recognize it, but I'm not very versed in Japanese occultism personally, and I don't really know what the vet sama is saying during her chant. And apparently others weren't sure either, because as we saw, since we've waited long enough, YouTube's updated and gotten some cool feature where we can actually see the most replayed part of the episode, and it looks like this was it. People were really trying to decode what she's saying. So if anyone can help in the comments or anything, that'd be greatly appreciated if you understand.
Is it like ancient Japanese, like spiritual?
Well, for like an island language,
rituals or something?
Japanese hasn't changed too much between like I guess its original
Well, there was
inception between now.
arigato full.
Yeah, but
and
that's like
its
part of the.
origins are pretty mysterious. It's generally agreed upon it comes from Chinese, but I don't know if it's agreed upon when that happened or like how.
I think something that's interesting
Yeah.
to me is that, like, of course, Hitoshi being the immigrant from America, perhaps he doesn't seem to believe in what's going on too much, because he asks Fetsama, like, oh, you're working hard or hardly working, and then he laughs and says it's comedy gold. So,
no one else seems to think this is very funny, especially
clearly
Vetsama, who takes her
doesn't
shrine maiden duties very seriously.
You see, there's like a cultural disconnect between them because, like, the three ladies in the scene, they take it very seriously, and all of a sudden you have him coming over almost as in like comedic humor. Oh, working hard or hardly working?
Comedy gold.
It's comedy gold, yeah. But like, he clearly doesn't respect their religion very much at all.
Exactly.
I mean, like how any American, especially the ones that came over and quite frankly ruined Japanese culture, had no respect for the country they claimed they were trying to fix the government of,
This ritual, this forcing of the demon Neko out of the Baka demon Neko out of Raku-chan didn't work. It was she had to just. It seemed much more of a personal thing.
It was hardly working. You're saying.
Exactly.
That is a good point. That is a really good point.
That is some great foreshadowing. I didn't even notice that. That's amazing. The writing never stops getting better. That's what the rewatchability of this is amazing. I mean, I've watched this show maybe over a dozen times, and I've never noticed that. Wow. All right. So, after this ritual, and before this ritual, there's like a fun magical girl pastiche where the Vetsama turns into a shrine maiden, which I thought was fun. But after the ritual's over, Vetsama makes sure to clarify that she just needs some rest. Raku just needs some rest. She has to actually. I don't understand. This was a strange choice. It really feels improvised. The voice actor for Vetsama wasn't speaking as clearly as she normally did, and the Koneko and Hitoshi seemed confused and asked her what she said, and then she spoke up. The meaning of this continues to be lost on me. All I can do is really guess at what they meant. Whether this was kind of foreshadowing Vetsama's insecurity with her ability to actually exorcise this demon, or if this was speaking to something greater that I haven't quite figured out yet. I'm not sure. So she does get some rest, and when Hitoshi and Koneko react to this, there's a cool little audio panning thing. The series has just improved as it's gone along. Unlike kind of an inverse Evangelion, where the animation in the final two episodes was.
I mean, it was at the point where it was just kind of like drawings at that point.
Yeah, at this point, the animation has increased tenfold. There's earlier in the series, there wasn't much like body physics. Things didn't feel like they had as much weight, but here they definitely do. It was impressive, and the audio again has gotten a lot better. They're starting to do more experimental things here at the end, and I just thought that was neat.
I feel like we can lend a lot of it to the final episode, or the final two episodes, being between the first episode's release. First episode came out from here now in 2020, 12 years ago, and episode 9 came out 10 years ago. Episode 10 was 9 years ago. So I mean, I feel like that as the tools were used more by the creators, they had the more time they had, the more love they could show into their project.
Yeah, and I love to see that kind of passion.
I think the animation are really stepped up here. I mean, there are a lot of examples. I think there are more examples in episode 10, especially of how the animation just significantly.
Yeah, it seems like they really gave it their all in the last episode.
Yeah, definitely. We can go more into detail when we get into episode 10, though, about how the animation definitely steps up.
All right, so the episode ends as Raku gets some sleep, and she awakens the next day, her nubile body seemingly reborn into her original form. And Koneko is very happy. There's a single tear shed. It's a very intense shot where it's only the teardrop falling. Very artful, almost cliched, especially coming from this series. I don't know. For as intense a scene it was, I've always thought that it could have been done more nuanced, in a more nuanced way. Not to say that it's bad or anything, just that I felt like this part really for the whole series was just a little bit cliche. Just this one scene with because a single teardrop, that's just a little corny, guys. I mean, Nyan Neko Sugar Girls, we've come to know and love it for its intense emotional resonance and plots that connect on a human level. And when you put something in that looks like it's from like I don't know, Days of Our Lives or something, it just took me out of it, especially for an episode that I think is generally very strong. We're seeing a build up to what will be the final episode in the series. We have Hitoshi, really he's continuing his lust after
yes.
we learn his name is what, Bokutashi?
Oh, I thought his name was Jeff.
We'll discuss that later. But yeah, we see him doing that. Raku's clearly, obviously, still smitten with Hitoshi. Koneko's caretaker role is just getting more intense, and we see some interesting shifts in Vetsama's character that make her much more interesting. I don't really have that much more to say about episode 9, so I'll leave that open to the floor for anyone's thoughts.
None that I can think of.
No, yeah, it's a pretty solid episode. There's really not much to say.
All right, episode 10.
It has an interesting start, yeah. Like for once, the intro's different. It's a different song. It's "It Is Love" or "Is This Love" by Whitesnake.
Is This Love by Whitesnake? Yeah. Now this song, I mean, it makes sense in the broad context of the show about as much as the old intro, but in this episode, especially towards the end, this theme song is so foreboding. It's actually, I think that it makes I like when they change things up for the final episode, so I really appreciated this this shift and a little bit of a shift in tone in the intro. It's exactly the same animation and everything, though, which, again,
I mean, like, they clearly put a lot of work into this episode, so we can't really expect them to make a whole new intro.
Yeah, of course not. I'm just saying that I think the intro, it's always been about love. It's always talking about looking for true love. And in this episode,
wherever you go,
they're no longer looking for it. They're questioning love. It's no longer a
I mean,
it's
love
no
is a
longer
very
an answer. It's a
love
question.
is a very big theme in this episode, and it being more of a question as opposed to an answer makes sense, I think.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of the thesis of the entire program, especially in the two plots that they really resolve in this episode. Because I'll get into the rabies stuff at the end, but the major plots they're resolving in this one are Hitoshi's love for Bokutashi and Raku's love for Hitoshi.
I mean, it seems like love is more of an antagonist in this episode, in a way. It kind of shows the dangers of love a little bit, I think.
And near the end, I think it does, yeah.
So, different intro. If we get stuck on the intro, we might be there all day. So let's move on.
Yeah.
So, Raku, the episode begins. Raku is just in a great void. She's completely and utterly alone. She is in suffering, and it's kind of a shocking image.
It's the Shadow Realm, I think.
Seeing Raku without her friends is distressing for many reasons. She is so reliant on her support system of namely Koneko that I pretty sure Raku would not be able to live independently, and I think I've talked about that in the past.
And yeah, we see Koneko melt in this horrifying
nightmare
realm, or
we see some interesting like just images kind of throughout this
she's
scene
serving
here.
Yes, I believe she's serving one of the she's serving mochi or mochi ice cream, one of the many what do they call it? You know, one of the many things that comes back to all the time.
throughout the series.
It's like one of the first things
green tea and mochi ice cream.
It's one of the first things we see them doing in the show is eating mochi ice cream.
So that's very interesting. And then Hitoshi wants give me some of that. He says, I believe, something along those lines.
And his face goes inverted and starts pixelizing. Like honestly, like rewatching this, we were all in shock. I think mostly just because we all always forget how honestly
horrifying the imagery is. And then we see the squirrel that gave her rabies, something that they don't discuss very much post rabies, but she had rabies from that squirrel, and it still appears in her nightmares.
Yeah, we are the squirrel. Don't forget.
Yes, whether this is a. And then she drops the mochi ice cream, and Raku wakes up. So let's discuss exactly what happens in the stream. She's running in a void. She falls to her knees. Koneko is serving mochi ice cream. Hitoshi says, "I want me some of that." The colors become inverted. Hitoshi's face distorts. Koneko seems to sort of melt. Images of the squirrel and Hitoshi and Koneko scroll by, and Raku's dream mind. And then Koneko drops the large ball of mochi ice cream, and Raku jolts awake. Okay, so the first image we see is again Raku in the Great Void. Are there any thoughts on this? Because the imagery here is very rich.
So I think there are two ways to interpret this dream. Obviously, the first one being like what is happening in like the show, and then the second one is what the meaning of the dream for us, the audience, is. I think that at least for us, the audience, the stream is like representing, like American imperialism in Japan, because like, how Koneko is who I think of representing the more traditional Japanese culture is serving mochi ice cream, a popular dish, and of course the American invader is saying, "Oh yes, give me some of that," and then the original tradition starts to melt away, and the American invasion inverts their colors as they become the true new traditional as they overtake the country. And of course the visions of the squirrel, which represent the conflict that first brought this bizarro world into reality, is just representing that.
Yeah. I think that the use of mochi ice cream here is even more interesting, considering that it was made by a Japanese American. And it was made, I think, I don't think it's like an ancient Japanese dish. I think it also came out in like the 90s or something like that. And again,
Well,
made by a Japanese American. So I think that its inclusion in this series is also a kind of way of showing maybe that this blend of culture isn't entirely negative. I mean, who doesn't like mochi ice cream? Certainly not Raku. She loves it.
I think it's like the gateway, you could say, into this invasion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do feel like that the black void and this whole dream sequence kind of signals the beginning of the end, as this episode is. I mean, it is the beginning of the end of the series. It is episode 10. Not only that, but of course, it shows our main characters going throughout life normally, but something's wrong. Something is twisted. I think it signals the falling out that we see later between the characters and the inevitable end of the series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what it could represent for the show, at least. I think that's what the stream means too. I agree.
I really like your idea, Rob, of the dream having multiple levels and for us, the viewer, and for within the meta of the show. But I'm going to try to go over my thoughts on each and every aspect, the few main imagery points in the dream, and we might be missing something. We always like hearing from the audience, so if you think we've missed something, please tell us. But Raku in the Void, I think, is just meant to show that Raku in a vacuum is aimless and directionless and cannot function. She collapses. But then she sees Koneko, who at first offers her mochi ice cream, one of her favorites, and she kind of has a focus again. But then Koneko melts, and melting. Koneko's kind of a maternal figure. So her melting away, I think, kind of symbolizes an end to childhood. And we see Hitoshi, an inversion of Hitoshi, I think is an inversion of his sexuality. If you were to ask, just like at the beginning of the series, or even now, if we didn't know about the plot with Bokutashi, if what Hitoshi's sexuality was, we would say, oh, he's kind of a hypersexual, heterosexual male.
Definitely,
who's very outgoing and but at this point, we know that he is, in fact, a closeted and insecure homosexual who he's a completely inverted version of the person he portrays to Raku. Is the person that she loves even real? And we know that it's not, that he's not who she thinks he is and who she fell in love with.
It seems like subconsciously she may even know that.
Yeah.
But
so
she doesn't want to come to terms with it.
Exactly. We see a lot of that in episode 10. A failure to come to terms. And then the squirrel appears. Now, I want to discuss how Raku-chan's illness went from something very tangible like rabies, something she got from a squirrel, something that she really did have. She had rabies. Um, went from something so tangible to something to a spiritual illness, to a demon. Um, Now that kind of speaks to the surrealism of the series. The series isn't grounded, and I like that kind of thing in programs. It's not dissimilar to Serial Experiments Lane or something in that variety. Again, we've talked about Evangelion. These programs aren't exactly grounded entirely or really at all in reality. There's very surreal elements. So when we see Raku sick and then we see her spiritually ill, I think that speaks to um, again how we treat illnesses in the modern era as very solid and real, except they're sometimes not. And I also think that has something to do with Vetsama being a shrine maiden as well as a doctor. There are aspects of human health that cannot be treated scientifically. There are aspects of the human mind that cannot be explored without some kind of understanding of the existence of a soul. And I appreciate this kind of spiritual aspect of the series. Um, and that's not super uncommon in like Japanese media, but it's treated very subtly and very beautifully, I think, in this program.
I mean,
Well,
it's kind of like
I was gonna
an
say there's
iron.
there's the relationship between the physical and the non-physical, the spiritual and the physical, that you quite just I feel like you don't see quite a lot nowadays. You kind of have the more scientific side, as you were talking about, Ben, how oh, it's just rabies, but later they come to terms with that this is something like less physical but more spiritual, that it in truth is a demon.
Yes, and I think this goes back to the moment she contracted the quote unquote rabies. She was betrayed. She was betrayed by a squirrel that she she had taken into her arms and wholeheartedly accepted and just wanted to befriend, and it lashed out at her, and that left a wound on her soul. And we see that wound kind of broken later in the episode, even deeper, I think. But that's my take on the dream sequence.
I mean, like, yeah.
Could it be a representation of her fighting her inner demons?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
her
it kind of is like a man versus self conflict a little bit in that regard.
Yeah.
She is frustrated with herself for her over reliance on Koneko and her unhealthy attachment to Hitoshi. I think is another way to. Yeah, I like that.
Say, and the ritual doesn't work because with context to the last episode, she never really gets over herself.
Yeah. So it's not a literal like demon as much as it is her personal struggle. That's
and,
what
like,
that's what
an inner
Vetsama
conflict as well.
understand.
It's also an inner conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. I like that.
All right, moving on from her dream sequence, she gets up. She's thirsty, which is interesting, again, considering her previous diagnosis of rabies. One of the symptoms, especially in late stages, hydrophobia. So obviously, she probably doesn't have literal rabies, or again, we're watching a program that's very surreal. And she collapses by the sink.
It seems like she's covered in oil or something. Like I don't know if this is just a visual glitch, but like I don't imagine it is. I imagine every single visual is intended to be seen, so it can't be a glitch. So I'm not really sure what the creator.
I feel like you could kind of chalk it up to her disassociation from the physical world at this point, because we obviously know that something's still wrong with her. That everyone else sees her as cured, yet here she is not cured, still ailed by whatever is affecting her. At this point, we know it's a demon. And you can see that she has like kind of like a glow or an outline to her character. That something is wrong with her. That she has this disconnect between what's going on in the real world and what's going on with her.
Yeah.
Yes, and these auras are already kind of established. We see kind of sparkly auras on Vetsam in early episodes and when she's treating Raku. So I think that's definitely something to take it from. But this is much more insidious and kind of gross. So I think that her dream really spoke to her insecurities, and that's why the spell, the incantation, whatever, Vet-sama did to her really failed, because she hasn't, as Carter said, gotten over herself. She hasn't developed past the need for this natural inhuman cat state, that this returning to a point where she doesn't have to be responsible for her actions, where she isn't harmed by other people's actions because she's a cat, which is what I think the state really stands for, this primal naturalistic kind of hiding from a society that has been built up and can be very painful to interact with.
It seems like a way to be able to be free of this is maybe her cat self represents her ego, and she just needs to let go of it.
Exactly, and that's why I think she's had. I think Raku experiences 3 deaths in this series. The first and maybe a second are when she's bit by a squirrel and when she first encounters the Kami-sama, or the demon. The third is in this. The second or third is in this episode, where she finally breaks the demon spell. It's an ego death, if you will. And the fourth and final is when Hitoshi finally puts Raku to rest. Now, I like to say 3 deaths just because that's very tidy. But again, those first 2 I think are closely intertwined and might be counted as one.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So she does get these wings back when Koneko finds her on the collapsed. She has wings, which not her full cat form, take note, but so she's fighting to she's experiencing
she's hanging on to her ego, you could say.
Yes, but she's trying to shake it. So it's not failing. Now we get this really moody scene between right after Koneko starts heading to the Vet-sama's office, of Hitoshi walking in the city, it looks like, at night. It's very moody. It's a very atmospheric scene, and he sees Bokutashi, his former captor, a man who, by all rights, would have abused him. And he approaches Bokutashi, but they aren't able to make contact here. But there seems to be some kind of plan that's developed in this scene for them to meet. And I thought this scene was probably the most atmospheric of the whole series. It was in a setting that was kind of unfamiliar compared to the rest of the show. There's like street lights. It's nighttime. Usually we see them in kind of a field, or in brightly colored houses or stores.
It has a very much lack of an urban area. I feel like this is our first taste of a true urban area with street lights and a more dark gray setting, like a nighttime urban environment.
Which makes sense because everything going on in their life right now is just completely topsy-turvy. And of course, being animals, they probably don't like spending that much time in a heavily urban area.
Yes, but it doesn't seem to bother Hitoshi,
who is human.
Maybe lives there? I can't tell.
He's also human, completely human. Which would make sense, too.
That is true. So these, perhaps Neko girls are kind of forced into rural areas, which is interesting. Farming? Maybe they're mostly rice farmers. That would make sense. Is mochi like derived from rice?
I believe
is that
it
real?
Is.
Yeah, I think that they might
had
have
it before, actually. Pretty good.
Okay. So yeah, I think that might be a theory. The entire world is kind of shrouded in mystery, which is cool, but parsing out any of the aspects of like the world building can be kind of difficult and up to interpretation, which is also neat. All right, so Koneko is trying to get into Vet-sama's office, but the door is locked, and Hitoshi seems to still be grandstanding. He's trying to be very masculine still, and very outwardly heterosexual. He says, he's like, leave it to the man. I'll break this door in. Anything for the ladies, after he does indeed break the door in with his leg, which is an impressive feat of strength. I did not expect that from Hitoshi.
The animation in that scene is also very good.
Yeah, it really captures the intensity. even though Hitoshi seems almost nonchalant about the situation, as he almost always is.
Yes.
Now, I am super unfamiliar with Spanish, but from upon knowing that Vetsama isn't in her office at what's revealed to be 3 a.m., Koneko falls down and says "pinche cabrón," which I guess is probably just a Spanish like exclamation of you know,
Of
she's
annoyance.
probably just upset. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
And it seems she breaks
it's not
into
a good
Spanish
word.
when she's upset.
I know what one of the words means, and it's not good. I mean, it's an outward. How do I explain this in the nicest way possible? It's an outward exclamation of frustration and distress. I mean, you can also see it like in her movements, but also in how the word is said. The word's actual meaning, of course, or the phrase's actual meaning is. I think it goes a little bit deeper than that too.
It's vulgar. Is it like a vulgar?
It is vulgar.
phrase?
Yes, it is vulgar.
Oh wow. Okay. We don't actually get a lot
lose-
of vulgarity in there, so that's interesting.
We're
Especially
gonna lose
coming
our
from
monetization.
really speaks to how upset she is.
I mean,
All
yeah,
right.
it's like the only time I think there's any sort of vulgar expression in the show, and it's not even in a language that we would understand as an English-speaking audience.
Yeah, and that I think speaks to how it's trying to discuss multiculturalism and the validity of it, and how maybe multiculturalism is simply repurposed colonialism.
Yes, I agree with that second thing you said more.
Okay. Green tea is again mentioned here in this moment of kind of fear and panic. But Nurse does appear. There's a cut to her coming into the office, and she asks if they've been there all night. And Hitoshi apologizes for breaking the door, to which Vetsama responds she has door insurance.
They all wake up, right? And we see that Raku is blushing quite a bit.
At Hitoshi? Yeah.
Yes, because they slept.
She's still smitten with the man.
Yes.
So,
which I think that's very important to mention, especially for what's coming up soon.
Yes, definitely. So the nurse tells them that they have one. She has one final option for Raku-chan, and that is to contain the demon for 1 day. She's basically giving Raku-chan one final day to live, one final day to live demon free. And Hitoshi asks why she didn't do this at first, and the nurse says she was just trying to make an entrance. In reference to her big transformation and everything, which I think is fun. Vetsama is definitely a fan favorite character for a reason. It might be a little bit due to how we don't really get to see how warped and twisted her personality is to the extent of the other characters. And she's just kind of fascinating as a shrine maiden doctor.
Yeah, she has a very good, amazing mind, evidently.
Yes.
Very impressive that she's a woman of science and of religion at the same time, because most of the time it's kind of mutually exclusive.
Yeah, I was discussing that earlier. When Vetsama does this next ritual, we kind of see vibrations behind Raku-chan, and vibrations are often, again, a reference to kind of the spiritual medicine when people talk about your vibrations are off, or
they're good or bad. Yeah.
Yes. It's again kind of I believe it was kind of more of a reference to that, like you were saying, Vetsama, a doctor, spiritualist. So
but yeah, obviously Raku at this moment had bad vibrations, and they are being corrected by the Vetsama. Yes. I almost called her Nurse again, but of course that is not her real name.
Yeah, that's my fault. I really ruined that for you guys. I really called her the wrong name for like months. That's on me. All right. So this one last day, we get some really nice stills of the friends spending time together, wearing kimonos, going to Festival Chan, and it's.
I do think it is interesting that it just so happens that her final day that Vetsama has given her, that it just so happens to coincide with a day that a big festival is happening. Really a grand hurrah for her very last day here on this earth.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It was really heartwarming until we see Hitoshi seeming hesitant, especially to go into Festival Chan, because he seems to have plans with his gay lover for a meetup, and he even leaves. He even leaves kind of in the middle of their time together. And Koneko excuses this. She says he's a very busy man. But I've maintained during this entire podcast that I think Koneko knows what's going on.
I think
knows
she hates him.
almost
and she
everything.
Wants to leave, you know.
That's what I thought as well. And we also don't even know what Hitoshi does for a living, but Raku accepts that he's very busy very easily. So maybe in our previous assessment of him as kind of a rich slacker, perhaps we were wrong.
I do
maybe
feel
he's an
like
investment banker.
Well, going back to where he was whenever he was in the dead of night earlier on in the episode, he's in a more urban environment. None of these other shots we see in urban environment beyond like it's more of a more nature-filled environment, a more rural area, including the festival. I do feel like that whenever he is away, that whenever he's doing things on his own time, he's in this more urban environment, whether it be in the city or wherever else he is. Whether this could mean that he has like some kind of a job that he works inside urban environment, or potentially like where he lives, if he lives in some sort of like an apartment besides a house, what exactly it means exactly.
Yeah. So we're not. So again, there's so many mysteries to Hitoshi's character, and we might not be able to parse them out on our own, especially as we're some really baka gaijin. We really don't understand Japanese culture on the level that's probably necessary to really get Nyan Neko Sugar Girls, especially in its critique of culture overall. We need a level of understanding that we might not have. And no offense.
But yeah, I mean, like, yeah, obviously we don't understand everything about their culture, and I think that that's kind of part of the show's appeal, personally.
Yeah, it's a very complex critique, and you
Yes.
can take it a lot of different ways. So Hitoshi-san leaves kind of in the middle of their time together, showing he seems so selfish. Even when he knows this is his friend's final day on Earth, she's going to be gone. She's going to die. He leaves. But Koneko seems to salvage the night. She serves green tea. A lot of friends that they seem to have gone to college with, which is interesting. I would have never guessed Raku was college educated. I don't know. Maybe she was a communications major or something. But they meet a lot of friends from college, and the designs are just really fun. And we really get to see the amount of people Raku-chan has affected in her tragically short life. And this I think this meeting with her friends is what finally causes that ego death. It's finally what really pushes over the edge. Seeing and interacting with other people, understanding her place in a world that she's been so isolated in and so insularly treated by Koneko-chan. I think that this meeting with her college friends is one of a very important part of the series. And again, I just love the designs; they're really fun.
I do find it interesting whenever it does go to the flashback that it does show like the characters. I feel like it's interesting how they're different they look. I mean, mind you, this is in their college days, but I feel like it's interesting how each character looks. Even the already established two main characters that we have, the two different Nekos. It's interesting how different they look from then and then compared to now.
Oh yeah, definitely. People's lives. I mean, I think that's. I think seeing these designs was just fun, and I could say a lot like about how time passes and people change, but this is just like one shot, so I'll lay off on that. And it's pretty obvious. So yeah, just really fun designs. I really like that direction they went here at the end with some great new characters.
I mean, I didn't even think they were in college yet. I thought they were still in school. I mean, with Raku being very young.
No, that's again very interesting. She might have dropped out freshman year, so she could be around like 18.
I feel
19.
like we're taking like how they put young too literally. I feel like that it is more of like a way of she's very young-minded, not just like age-wise. College truthfully is like a school meant for any kind of age, whether it be people who are going to college right after high school here in the States, or people going to college at a later time in their life, maybe after they've had kids or after they've done certain things like fought in the military. I feel like that it's more of she's very young. young, as in young-minded, at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's generally the consensus we came to, because she seems very mature in body, and obviously she's been to college, so young-minded. This gives a lot of credence to that idea, and I think that it might just confirm it like outright. There's a fun character. There's Burrito Senpai. He was my personal favorite design. He he reminded me of the Mexican Gundam from one of the old Gundam series. It's I think the interpretation of Hispanic culture in anime is just fantastic. It's really good. It takes a lot of inspiration from Looney Tunes, Speedy Gonzales stuff. Always really fun to see. All right. Hitoshi is still not really present, and here again, this important food item comes up. Koneko's serving mochi ice cream, just how Raku likes it. And she lives through the night. She lives through the night because of that ego death. So, and then we get into our really kind of our final scene. Raku is alive. The audience, well, at least the first time I watched this, was really relieved. I thought it was going to be a happy ending. I thought at this point, Raku could take this blow to her, finding out about Hitoshi's true nature.
Well, and not only that, whenever she awakes, she mentioned something along the lines of her feeling better than ever. So something has obviously worked, and yeah, as you mentioned, her ego death. That's not taking a toll on her anymore. Her ego, and she feels like a new person at this point. But later, do we learn that some of that's not the truth, and the truth is much darker.
I think that living through this near-death experience, Raku tells Koneko she gets the resolve to go tell Hitoshi how she feels, and Koneko supports this. And I think this is because Koneko wants it to be over. She wants Hitoshi kind of gone. And when I don't think either of them realize how much it takes for Raku to, even at this point, put her faith in people. That wound left by the squirrel is still there, and when we see her leave, I don't know. I thought that it would be a happy ending. We also get they meet up with Hitoshi outside. There's great wind animation, and we get a few frames of them completely stripped, kind of. I guess they couldn't take their shirts off for censorship reasons. That's my guess.
I feel like this is more symbolism than just like a couple of frames. Ooh, look, funny. I think it does show the two Neko girls in like a moment of almost vulnerability. It shows them at their most vulnerable, where Hitoshi-san, you see him. Only thing that changes is his hair. And that's it, just for those couple of frames that you see. I truthfully do think that this is him being more standoutish compared to the rest. The others, they lose parts of their clothing. Well, he only loses parts of his hair. I feel like this plays something more towards his character and showing that he is different from them. We do see that he is a lot different from them in his personality, where he keeps up this facade, but you kind of see this facade peeled away just for a brief moment to see that something's much deeper and darker is under there.
I actually interpreted this in the polar opposite way. They all left their shirts on, and Hitoshi's pants were off screen, so I just assumed, again, like for some censorship reason. But they were stripped, and their hair and ears were gone, and Hitoshi's hair was gone, and they were all left completely just skin on their. And I thought this was a moment that was meant to show sameness and how stripped of everything, stripped um of everything that makes the whole mess of your life, you are essentially the same. You have the same potential. Everyone is defined by what is around them, like hair or pants. And I thought that was the point of that. But your take on it, I can respect, because I also find Hitoshi to be kind of a despicable human. All right. So, do you guys think that Koneko knows what's fated to happen when Raku confesses?
I think she does. She totally does.
I kind of
That's
think
why she
not.
encourages it.
I feel like that in the scene as it comes up, that it's almost like a moment of shock and surprise, both for us, the viewers, and them as characters, knowing each other.
I don't think she knew that he was gay, but like I think she knew that he wasn't into her no matter what. You know.
I think she had a feeling, but didn't want her fears to be realized, and that's why she can't get over herself.
Perhaps.
Okay. I think that Koneko knew everything. I think Koneko knew about Hitoshi's lover. I think she understood what he was doing to them. It's why she never reciprocated anything or kind of flirted back. I think that the only thing she didn't know was how Raku would react. I think she had high hopes.
I was talking about Raku. Sorry.
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
I
know. I thought that she was. I think that Koneko was kind of, and she thought she was completely in control of the situation until the words actually left Hitoshi's mouth. And when Raku confesses, it's an emotional high for her. But then we see Hitoshi, and I think this is the first scene we see the weight of his actions really hit him. He says, "Oh, Raku," it's very poignant that this is the point where he finally feels what he's done is wrong.
He feels the weight of his actions, that his actions have finally caught up with him, and he realized that, the moment of realization for him of what he's done.
And it's too late. It's too late for him, and it's too late for her. And it's the perfect climax. I think this is truly the perfect climax of the series. And Bokutashi-san, there, as Hitoshi tells Raku that Bokutashi is his lover now, Koneko actually comes back into the screen, even though she had left for their privacy, because she notices that Raku is collapsed. She's devastated, which again I think was partially part of her plan. She was going to come in and kind of schmooze her and get her even more reliant. But she goes, "I thought his name was Jeff." And the entire cast simply stands in disbelief and shock for a few seconds.
They all stare right at the screen too. They acknowledge the camera weirdly enough. You know, I mean,
So
kind of an odd scene.
It is an odd scene.
I think on our viewing of this scene, we did mention, modern day we know about things. Is it 21st Jump Street has that one infamous scene?
22 Jump Street, yeah.
Yeah, 22
from
Jump Street
2014.
From 2014, 2 years after this media had been produced, the final episode of this. And we kind of had like a moment of shock, us as viewers, thinking back to that, to 22nd Jump Street, of, there's this very infamous, My
Name is Jeff.
Yeah, my name's Jeff, the part of the culture, the meme in our modern day culture. But then looking back to the dates, upon realizing that, the 10th episode, the final episode of this series, had already been released the day before Christmas of 2012. This moment of realization it was interesting for all of us sitting there watching.
My theory about this is a little bit out there, but I think that the creators of this show have some kind of superhuman grasp on the selective subconscious. They were aware of the mimetic power of the phrase "my name Jeff" at least 2 years before a little under 2 years before its existence, and they pulled from that and they put it in their program. Not in a time traveler sense, but again, it's a selective subconscious sense. And I've talked about how some of the characters in this program meet the Jungian archetype, and I think that the writer and creator of the show is so in touch with kind of Jungian mythos that they are able to draw from that selective subconscious and put something in their show as kind of a dog whistle, as kind of a pointing at you and showing you what you can be capable of if you're able to fully understand Nyan Neko Sugar Girls. If you are ever able to fully grasp this program, I truly believe that you will awaken to some kind of ESP superhuman power and ability. And I've been trying to do this for the last 4 years of my life, and I just can't. I can't break the code. That's my theory.
That could be part of the ego death, like, kind of interpretation, perhaps if you would let that happen, you would expand your mind and unlock your potential.
Or you will die. Or
you will die.
Your
This
ego
is
will
a
be
warning.
gone. Your
The
ego
show
will
is
be gone.
The show is a warning, I think.
You'll have nothing to ground you for when someone finally rips you apart. When someone rips apart, what's left without your ego? Your id. You're nothing. You're nothing, and you're torn. Raku is ripped apart. She's shed all of what she is, and is just destroyed.
I think this show could be either, showing the true potential and also a warning of what happens if you were to do it incorrectly. I think it's put this into. This is why it's such a vital scene. It's honestly kind of a shame that this is the most replayed scene, because I think that this is the most vital scene to the show and its message.
When you lose, what grounds you when you're hurt, there's nothing to hold on to anymore. And I think that's really what kills Raku. She's even graceful in her death, which is very tragic. She wishes the best for Bokutashi and Hitoshi-san, even as she lays dying. And she says goodbye to her friends, and Hitoshi can't even look her in the eyes as she lays there in Koneko's arms.
Yeah.
And that it was a very powerful scene. It was very tragic.
Yeah, I shed a tear, honestly. Like it was very it hit me emotionally. Especially.
It was.
I think the voice actress did a really great job in portraying a dying, lost person, cat girl.
Yeah, and the Hitoshi, I think, finally gets humanized, and it's very unfortunate that he really gets his full character arc only in this final episode. Sometimes I feel like this show would have benefited from a second season or even a few more episodes.
I mean, we do get a few more episodes with the bonus ones, but I feel like that's truthfully all we really get.
I don't even really think he's humanized in this scene, because in the very next scene in the funeral, he tries to deny his responsibility in her death.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not really his fault.
Are you a Hitoshi apologist, Carter?
I mean, he was just saying he's like, yeah, I'm gay. And she dies because of hearing the news. I think it's more of her ego.
I think the issue is that he leads her on purpose. He knows himself that he's not what he says or what he makes himself up to be. Yet he leads her on throughout the entire 10,
he tells her
9
he's very arrogantoful. I mean, that's not something you just say lightly.
Yeah, he's been flirting with these girls the entire show, and I think he was at least somewhat aware that Raku was infatuated with him, but he didn't treat her with the respect she deserved, and now he has blood on his hands. And I don't think that under different circumstances, if he was more straightforward, if he was more honest, if he wasn't so two-faced, he would be able to say this, and she would have been fine. She would have lived, but and especially this moment when Raku has gone through such a spiritual change, I don't know. It's very sad.
Yeah.
She says a line that I think really plays into my ego death can be dangerous theory, where she says, "My Neko demon is gone, but my heart cannot go on." The Neko demon, of course, being that kind of protective covering that she's been using.
I think
she can't go
all
on.
Along.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a great line anyway.
It is. It's a fantastic line. I think this final episode has the most condensed, best writing in the entire series. It's up there. It's at least in my top 3 favorite episodes, especially for its length. It feels so short because there's so much happening, so many loose ends getting tied up.
It's like a full 28 minutes, though. It's the longest episode there is, but context-wise, and you sitting there relatively to you, it does feel like one of the shortest episodes, but it does have the most impactful meaning to it.
Yeah, the shortest episode. Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, the funeral scene. It's the falling action. I always appreciate when there's falling action. I like when there's a little bit of decompression and we get to see kind of the characters where they are afterwards. So Hitoshi-san tries to talk, and Vetsama aptly cuts him off. This is kind of a tense scene. He is being blamed for her death, and for him to talk at the funeral of the woman that he killed, I don't know. I think that Vetsama was justified.
Yeah, I think I really want to go into how Hitoshi tries to deny his involvement. You know, he tries to say like, "Oh, I think she's strong. I think."
Right, that's a
I
level
don't
of
think
cognitive
that she could have
dissonance.
died of a broken heart. But then his lover, actually, I think it's very interesting because he's not really portrayed as a very
I think
good person.
Hitoshi's the true demon.
Yeah, I think that maybe, but like what I was saying, like even the person he tries to like he snaps him back to reality almost, which is interesting because he's not really portrayed as a good person at first. You know, being a kidnapper and all that, but like
Yes.
weirdly enough, he does have enough self-awareness to say, "Oh no, you killed her with your lover."
Yeah, but he's reveling in it. He seems joyful. He seems kind of into it. Like it might be a little hot for him. And
yeah, it's why he likes Hitoshi so much. I think that he is attracted to evilness.
He's attracted to kind of the
awful person.
the callousness of Hitoshi. It's very similar to a lot of some boys love and yaoi manga explore very dark themes, for example, killing, stalking, and the gay characters in that are very twisted, and I think that this is trying to talk about that in a way that's less fetishized and more just look at these people and how callousness and a focus on their own personal pleasure can hurt others around them so much.
Do we have any closing thoughts for the episode beyond these final scenes?
So,
I mean, like, there's just a lot to say, honestly.
Koneko and Bokutashi both understanding that Hitoshi needs to take full responsibility for what he did to Raku is I think it's very moving, and it speaks a lot to Hitoshi. Even when he feels he's done something wrong, he has so much difficulty actually admitting responsibility, and I think that having him change immediately into like a kind person who like takes responsibility would have been stupid. So I really do appreciate this scene because earlier it seemed like he felt so deeply troubled.
And it's almost like they're keeping with the theme here that he's sticking to his guns, that he's not in a tone for an action that he feels himself that he didn't really cause, but in truth he did.
Yes. Okay. Do we have anything else to say about the final falling action funeral scene, or?
I mean, honestly, most of what you can say is Hitoshi's denial of the situation, really.
Yep, and that's the last we see of his character, and we get a new outro this time. This being released on December 24th, we get a kind of a Christmas song rendition by Koneko-chan of
It's interesting because normally Raku would sing
by Mariah Carey.
Normally Raku would sing the ending song, but she's gone now, obviously. And
and we see a very large X circled around Raku's character in the ending still that they use in the credits.
I think it's interesting.
Whitesnake is credited for the opening song, which is different because the other creator of the normal opening was never credited. So I think this says a lot about the respect the creator has for Whitesnake's music, which is another code that I might need to understand before I'm able to really unlock the superhuman consciousness that I seek.
I mean, do you really want to? It seems like the show tries to warn you away from that. I mean, the next time you are denied something very important.
Rob, I feel like you're taking this kind of just lightly, honestly. I feel like you're just kind of taking this like in a joking manner, when I feel like it's something more than that. It's not just a joke. There's something much more to it.
I mean, I'm not trying to make a joke. I'm trying to make sure our leader doesn't die.
When you get into Nyan Neko Sugar Girls, you need to understand that it's going to change the entire way you interact with the world around you. It's going to change how you understand your own thoughts, and it's going to make you kind of lust for this forbidden fruit they've put in front of you. And one day I'm going to eat that fruit, Rob. And if I die, then I'll have at least experienced what Raku experienced in her final moments. And I think that was a kind of human bliss, that kind of deep feeling, those deep feelings that were able to kill an emotion able to kill. Do you understand how powerful that is? To be able to feel that deeply is something that I think a lot of people would want to understand. To be able to feel that deeply, I think would put you on such a level of relation to your fellow man that I think you would enter a different level of humanness, and that's what I want.
Maybe that's what the cat represents, the next level of humanity, the next evolution of the human race. And I think I know the clue you're missing too.
What is it?
The representation of the show talking about Japanese nationalism.
I've bared my soul to you, Robert. I've taken a leap of faith and told you about the deepest level of Nyan Neko Sugar Girls lore that I've been able to uncover, and you
made a mockery
keep
of it.
discussing your political agenda on this podcast, and I don't know what to say to you. I don't know what to say to you to make you understand that Nyan Neko Sugar Girls transcends your Japanese nationalistic beliefs, and I don't think I agree with your interpretation of Nyan Neko Sugar Girls on a level of Japanese ultranationalism. I think that as far as TV goes in general, as far as any piece of art goes, it's kind of a kaleidoscope. And when you look at it, Rob, and you're an idiot and a dum-dum, and you look at it and you see your opinions reflected back at you, I think that this says a lot about you as a
I feel like it makes Rob out to be the average user of Twitter who sits in an echo chamber and sees everything inside of media that they feel like reflects their beliefs and instantly thinks that, oh, this agrees with me here, so I must be right. When in truth, it goes much deeper than that. And there are more beliefs reflected than what's on the surface. You have to dig deeper. And instead of using the lens of self-fulfillment and self-fulfilling prophecy, that you look deeper and try and ask the harder to ask questions about the media you're looking at.
I think there's much more nuance in this series than you're giving it credit for, Rub. I think that it's not a cut and dry hit piece on American interference in Japanese culture. I think that it definitely critiques it at some level, but I definitely don't think that this is telling us to praise Hirohito and reopen Site 22 in Manchuria.
It's not inspiring people to catch babies with bayonets.
It's not inspiring people to go on killing competition sprees in the heart of China. I think
seeing who can get the most heads at the end of the day.
And putting American POWs in pits and lighting them on fire with kerosene barrels.
Do you like that kind of thing, Rob?
I think his silence truthfully tells us a little bit more about his character.
Yeah, and what's weird is that his profile picture also looks like Emperor Meiji.
Are we ready to wrap it up?
I think we are. I think we can go ahead and wrap it up now.
All right. Thank you for joining us for the final episode of the NYANCAST.
It's taken us a while to get here.
Sorry for our very long absence between shows. We've had kind of a busy time. It's been a crazy couple years, but it's finished, and we might have some bonus episodes in the future. We might analyze some other things.
Some other things, some cut content, some extra episodes, maybe some bloopers from here and there of our recording
sessions. But no promises.
Here. No promises.
Because making this was already a real crucible. But thank you for joining us. And again, if you have any comments, questions, or if you're really concerned, please leave a comment. We love hearing from fans. Thank you.
I'm just sorry I wasn't here for very many episodes.
Oh, yeah, Carter, it was nice having you. And
thank you for
thanks
having
again to Rub of Rub's Gaming Quarter and this fellow over here named Yellow. See you maybe in the future, and thanks for sticking around.